Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 7th episode of By the Drip. This podcast is about coffee, entrepreneurship, and the people we meet through the amazing story of coffee. I'm your host, David Crosby, founder and CEO of ROSSO COFFEE ROASTERS. My co-host today is Cole Terode from Forward Coffee. Today's guest is Matt Winton. He recently just won the World Brewers Cup Championship, and that means he makes a mean cup of coffee. Matt is also one of the nicest and beloved coffee professionals in the industry. In today's podcast, we talk about how Matt went from an aerospace engineer to barista, Brewers Cup, what it is, preparing for competition, and choosing coffees. We touch on the revival of the blend, applying sensory science to coffee tasting, and finally, what's changed for Matt since winning World Brewers Cup. It was an amazing conversation with Matt, and I hope you enjoy it too. Matt Winton, World Brewers Cup Champion. Matt, how does that sound? How does that make you feel? How's it been?
How does that sound? Pretty good. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's still not fully sunk in yet. It's a little bit more than it was about a month ago. I think the first, couple of weeks, I guess, were a little bit surreal in the way that you see other people win, but then to realize it's actually you is kind of weird. It's just like, I feel like I just sort of did a thing, and it makes me sound kind of ungrateful, I think, but it's kind of like wild. And then occasionally I'm just like walking down the street and I'm like, oh, fuck, yeah, I won that thing. It's pretty cool. I mean, I'm pretty grateful for the opportunities it lends, which is nice.
Before we get into winning the competition, if we go back in time to the beginning, you used to be a aerospace engineer. How does an aerospace engineer go?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think it was sort of like a thing that just sort of happened, and I fell into it quite naturally. So I used to be like aircraft maintenance engineer avionics was the sort of title of the aircraft engineering side of things. And it was basically like all of the electronics, the instruments, the radios on mostly helicopters in the Army when I was in Australia. That was like the thing I did straight out of school. I think I was 17 when I joined the Army, and then started working on aircraft. And I mean, I loved it. It was super cool. Around 2015, I started to, explore other things that I wanted to do. It wasn't that I just wanted to do aircraft forever. It was like something's missing. I feel like doing something else. And like I started just exploring lots and lots of different jobs and hobbies and interests. And like the busiest point that I remember, I was working as a bartender, as a glassy in a nightclub, a little bit of barista work, a little bit of DJing. I had a dog training business, and I was building helicopters for defense all in the same time. And that was a bit crazy, but like that was, I think, my way of trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the world. So going from having this very fixed career path of like, all right, cool, I work on these helicopters, this is my job, this is the next step, blah, blah, blah. Went from that to basically having anything being possible. And that was only achievable once I left the military, where there is a lot of structure in the Army. Then I moved into this world where, the world's your oyster sort of thing. And I could do whatever I wanted. So like, that's why I just did everything. And I ended up moving to Europe in the start of 2016. And I found a job in Zurich for the aircraft stuff. It was like a contract. Before that, I was in England and Wales and sort of traveling around place to place. They pay for your flights, your accommodation. It's like contracting essentially. 6 weeks here, 8 weeks there sort of thing. And I was at one in Zurich. And when it finished, it was like a beautiful summer day here. It was like blue sky, warm weather. It was my first European summer. It was super nice. And I decided just to stick around for a bit. And I went for a walk in the old town, and I came across this cafe. I heard a couple of things about it. I wasn't really working in coffee. At that point, I didn't really know what I was doing. But I just sort of bluffed my way in there and was like, hey, I'm Australian. I'm a barista looking for a job. And the guy was like, oh, you're Australian. You're a barista. Yeah, come in. And like he sat me down, started throwing coffee at me. And funnily enough, the very next day, unfortunately for him, he's a good friend of mine. He's fine now, but he burnt his hand really badly. So he wasn't able to work. And I basically just stepped straight into that job full time. And I was just 100% into coffee. Like, I would set up the cafe, listening to podcasts, start making coffee all day, playing around, experimenting, trying to be better at everything because I wasn't really good at anything. And the whole aircraft stuff just sort of fell to the side. It just like fell away. All right, that's not really interesting anymore, but this coffee thing is really cool. I think I really like the idea of like being of service. And that was something that you didn't really get with aircraft. The feedback you get is sort of like maybe months later or something, even though, it's an important job of like, you have an aircraft that's sitting there, it has this one problem, it's your responsibility to fix it. If it doesn't get fixed, it doesn't leave on time. Maybe there's passengers that are stranded. Maybe it's, has to go out and do aeromedical evacuation, something really important. So there is like some feedback, but it's just different. I think I really like this thing of being of service. That was the thing that drew me across to coffee initially. And then, I don't know, just that general nerdery, I suppose, of diving head deep into a subject where there's not really much structure. You can sort of make of it what you will almost. That was something I realized with all these podcasts. There's no real like education pathway. There's no real structure for being a barista or learning about coffee. And that's what I did. I just figured it out as I went along, just reached out to people, learned from these guys, did that expo, did this course, whatever, just all over the place. Yeah, I loved it.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. I didn't know you were in the Army. So why the Army? I
think when I was 17, sort of straight out of school, I didn't really have anything else to do.
You just seem like the sweetest guy. And the Army seems like the furthest thing, from what I would have ever guessed.
So it was in Australia. It wasn't mandatory like a lot of countries are. Like I live in Switzerland at the moment, and here it's mandatory. So I say I was in the military, and they're like, yeah, duh. But in Australia, it's not mandatory. It's voluntary. And I did this subject at school. It was a new thing called Aerospace Studies, and this was like high school. So you finish when you're 17, and I loved it. It was really cool. So I thought I was going to do something with aircraft or like something aviation related. And I suppose the Army's kind of a good choice when you don't have anything else that you know what you want to do. I consider myself like a totally different person from back then. It feels like a past life with all of the military side of things. It's just so long ago, and I've changed so much since then. So I think people seeing me now wouldn't really understand that, or can't really imagine that I was in the military. And I used to be this really sort of like meatheady guy. I was definitely an arsehole back then as well. Maybe Cole can still relate to that. And things change a lot, I think. Working in coffee was a way for me also to, I suppose it's not necessarily coffee, but opening up the doors to figuring out that there's more things than what I thought there was. So, that also led the path to like spirituality, which is something I'm very into. Those things, along with coffee being a very sort of expressive, freeing sort of industry where you can sort of do what you want and be who you want. There was not really any structure, which takes a little bit of adjusting to, from this strict, structured military way to being this, world's your oyster sort of role, I suppose. Like it's just everything goes after that. It was good though. It's good for people who don't know what they want to do, I think, because it does give you the structure and it does give you education, good money. You're automatically in this team, and like that team is, your best friend sort of thing. That side of it's really cool and really important.
So you walk into this cafe, you start working there immediately. And were you struck by like the specialty coffee bug right away?
Yeah. Like I just remember, before that, I bought an AeroPress. I think that was my first brewer. And I was playing around at home, but everything tasted like shit because I was just using tap water. And I had like a little Hario hand grinder that wasn't particularly good. I was into coffee, but never into working into coffee. Like it wasn't like, oh, this is going to be my job forever sort of thing. It was just like, oh yeah, this is tasty and this is not tasty, and that's about it. I think my first ever specialty coffee was in 2015 in a shop in Brisbane, and the very first one was a natural Ethiopian on espresso, and they called it Purple Haze, and it was just like this blueberries in a cup, and I'm like, this isn't the dark roast that I'm used to. And then shortly after that, I did like a little course with those guys, and we had like an anaerobic natural Ethiopian coffee as well, which back in 2015 was not very common at all. So it's pretty cool that was like one of my very first, I think that was my very first filter coffee, apart from shitty homemade French presses.
And then what got you into the competition side of industry?
Oh yeah, competition. I constantly forget about them. I think actually it was podcasts. Like I was listening a lot to Tamper Tantrum in particular back in like 2016. And I think I listened to every episode of Steve and Colin blabbering on about whatever they were talking about. And they always had guests on there who were from the competition scene in some way or another. Like there was just people who were in that circle. And it seemed like that was sort of the logical career progression in a way. It's not really for career, but like, oh, if you think you're good at what you do or you want to get better at what you do, then I suppose it still sort of is a bit like that. Like that is a very good, not a very good, but it is a, how do you say that? Like it's a benchmark that we hold even maybe unintentionally. If you do well in competitions, then people seem to sort of value you and what you say and what you do and things like that. Even though maybe it's not the best metric that we have, it's still one that we sort of use. I mean, for me, I think still competing is something that's a lot more tied to personal growth and personal development and the connections that I make. Like, you know, meeting you guys back in 2018 in Amsterdam at the pre-training space. What was it called? The academy? Was it the Coffee Academy?
The Champions Hub.
Champions Hub. That's the one. Yeah. Like, you know, I remember meeting you guys there and I was just stoked to be around like other people who are really nerdy and stuff as well. It's super cool. Yeah, so I think that's the cool part of it, or that's my motives at least.
Do you think the structure of coming from the army and sort of the rigidity that I imagine life had at that point, translating that experience and sort of the boundaries that existed there into the competition realm and like the structure that you sort of have to play within in the competition, do you think that experience in your, you know, past life, as you sort of said, has benefit you now today in your competition success?
I'd say probably in general. Like I think that sort of structure or the thing, maybe less structure, but more like the things that you learn there are really important, like sort of life lessons in general. Being punctual, being respectful, setting up a structure, having a greater team to rely on, all of these sorts of things would definitely be in general things that I think would help me like my whole life. Coming out of the army and going into the totally no structure, do whatever you want thing was kind of like, I think you have to go too far in order to come back and find the middle. So, you know, I was in the full structured way, then I went sort of full unstructured and it was just like a little bit airy and not really grounded. And then you end up somewhere in the middle. So I think there's definitely things from the military that have helped, you know, that persistence, you know, not giving up when things get hard. But then I needed to really balance that with things that I learned, especially from the spiritual side of my practices, where I need to listen to my body more and I need to give myself more rest and give myself more space in order to actually be productive and grow. Like in that time in Milan, when we were there in the week before, like I said to the guys in the team, like, yeah, look, every day at around, you know, 1 or 2 o'clock, I need 20 minutes for myself and just need to have a quick medi. And after that, I'm sweet. But if I don't have that, then I'm just going to be a wreck and I'm not going to get anything done. So finding the balance between rest and sort of integrating the things and then also doing a lot. And I think that sort of dance and that balance is super key in life, let alone just in competitions. But in competitions, it's such like a intense, stressful, little block of like, all right, we're going to be out 100% here for this time. And then afterwards it's, you know, whatever. And before it's whatever. But for this short amount of time, we're like, bam, 600% into every detail and just up. So then it's that concentration or that concentrated period makes it even more important to have the yin and the yang in that.
It's so critical in the competition world to find that balance. And I think that's so important what you just said, sort of having the yin and the yang there. It's a roller coaster. I don't think people realize it and realize the importance of having a team that you can trust every time that, you know, I've been there and, you know, Dave is there right beside me and he's frankly carrying a lot more of the load than I am. I'm just, you know, trying to look pretty and know my words and know my dance routine when I go out there. But I don't want to do the ins and outs of everything else in between. I want to disconnect. I want to have some mindfulness. I want to be very present and in that moment in order to feel that I can go out there and succeed. And I think watching you compete, you know, a handful of times now, 3 different world championships and having, you know, great success at all 3, I think that's something I've seen from you and gotten to sort of mirror a little bit and better understand myself through witnessing your practices. So I think important stuff to talk about and unpack.
For sure. Weird thing about the team, that's something I only realized this competition now. I was able to leave 100% of the brewing, the water, and the grinding and the blending to Sam. I was able to give everything else to Tom. And then at some point, I could just focus purely on myself, the routine, the flavor calls, and just get into the zone. And it's never felt better. Like I would never want to do a competition without these guys, because it's so good to be able to just, give yourself the space, disconnect a little bit from the whole, you don't need to know everything, right? But if it's just you, then you do need to do everything. And that's it's not that I've been alone in the past, it's just that I've needed to control everything. So now it was good to have that team around me that I could fully trust that, okay, cool, they're just doing that thing. Don't even need to worry about it. Just, forget about it. Let's go listen to some music and relax. And yeah.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about Brewers Cup and talk about the rules. So some of our listeners might not be coffee professionals, and the two of you could discuss that a little bit, and then we'll go deep dive into each aspect.
The main ones that at least Cole and I have participated in have been the barista competition, which is more espresso based, serving espressos, milk drinks, and signature drinks in 15 minutes. There's 6 or 7 judges floating around. It's a big thing. It's quite a lot more show and presentation based, I guess. And then the Brewers Cup, I'd say, is a bit more stripped back. There's just 3 judges plus a head judge, so 4. And it's just 3 filter coffee, 3 hand brews, manual brews. It's a lot more intimate. There's only 10 minutes. There's less to do. It's a bit more, just you and the judges, I'd say. That's the main differences. Is there anything else you reckon, Cole?
I guess with Brewers Cup, there's also 2 components to it. There's the compulsory and then the open service. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about both of them. They think about the glory of the open service and getting to present the most beautiful coffee you can find, the most exciting brew method, et cetera, et cetera. But I think compulsory is so hypercritical to succeeding in Brewers Cup. And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you did for compulsory that is either different to other people, a different approach, different strategy, or maybe it wasn't at all and you just found success in whatever you did.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, because you literally hit the nail on the head, because I forgot the compulsory existed there for a few minutes. I mean, 50% of the competition is that compulsory section or the compulsory service where everyone does get the same coffee. And now there is no coaches around. It's just you, the coffee, and 30 minutes of time plus a little bit extra to prep and then brew the 3 coffees that should be identical and tasty. And, you can't manipulate the water. You can't manipulate the grinder. You can change the grind setting, but you have to use that grinder. So it's pretty limiting. The way that I approached compulsory was I just trained the fuck out of it for months and months and months. If you ever ask Tom about why he thinks I won, I guess he'll probably say compulsory, because all through the lockdown, I was still training and still playing around and trying to find methods and I was working it, and I worked it a lot in the build up to the competition. But there's a few key things that I think that I did differently. I trained a lot of different coffees, and in the end, the coffee that we got was sort of what I expected anyway. So there was no secrets there. It was probably a Wash Colombian, something along these lines. Relatively good, not too roasty, not too underdeveloped. It was just a good coffee. It sort of offered some character, a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of acidity. The goal was just to get the most out of it. I turned straight away to a concentrate method with the Aeropress and added some bypass. I suppose the only thing that I did maybe differently to anyone else was that I had very coarse grind setting, very cool temperature in the brew, and very hot water in the bypass. So nothing really new there. It was something that I guess Tetsu would have also taught Daiki, who came second. His compulsory score was also very high. It was just that mine was a little bit higher. And he scored a little bit higher than me in open service, but thankfully the difference was a little bit more for me in compulsory in favor of me, which is nice. I think there's no big secret, but something that Tom taught me and reinforced in me a lot is to trust myself. not only because there's no one else up there to confirm your taste and confirm your suspicions about the coffee, about the brew, but like we've also, I mean, I trained for hours and hours and hours. Some days in the build up in the 2 months before, it was just like take 3 random or 4 even random bags of coffee, and in the space of a couple of hours, just brew and just do this whole compulsory service and just test different coffees. My whole thing was try and get a coffee or try and get a brew that was good enough in a short amount of time. So the first 10 minutes was like, all right, let's just make it good enough. Here, if I serve this, I'm not going to be last. And then after that, sort of go down a rabbit hole, make some tweaks, and then keep that first cup to see if I could compare it to the last one. Okay, is it better or is it not better? Which direction do I go? So things like this, I think, are quite interesting. I heard someone, I think it was the Norwegian competitor, he scored extremely well in his compulsory. And something he did, which I thought was quite interesting, was he ground at the start of the practice. So it's all very fresh coffee. It's like 7 days old. And he just chose his grind setting and he kept that. And so he had essentially coffee that was rested for half an hour before he actually brewed, which of course would probably help a lot with opening up and degassing. So it's quite a smart way to do it as well, I think. Some things like this are probably the small details that help, but really just trusting myself. Like I tasted so many coffees. I know what's good. I know what's not good. And on stage, I think, or in the pressure of this time restriction, it's so easy to second guess yourself. But you've just got to trust your gut and trust your palate because you've done this a million times and you know what's good and you know what's not good. So that was the most simple thing that Tom taught me that I thought was really good.
Do you go up there into your compulsory service with a bunch of different brew methods, or were you convinced you were going to use the AeroPress?
This time I had 2. We had the luxury and the privilege of not being one of the first people. So I got the chance to talk to some other people who already went on stage, even the chance to taste 1 or 2 of the leftovers of the brew. There wasn't very much, but just enough to give me an idea of the coffee. And Sam and I spoke about it and we said, yeah, let's go straight for concentrate. No point doing an immersion because we tried one guy's immersion or drip and we weren't happy with the results. So we were like, all right, cool. We'll avoid that straight away. Go straight for concentrate. And then I had 2 different ways of making a concentrate. One was with a clever dripper, basically, just like I don't know, how would you call that? Like when it's like a cone, but it's flat. It's like the Melita, like the clever dripper shape. It was a Bonavita immersion dripper, but that shape, immersion concentrate, and also the AeroPress. But, you know, if we had no clue about it before, then I would have had a dripper and would have tried a full immersion brew as well and just seen what was going on. Yeah.
And you did it. Here you are, Matt Winton, World Brewers Cup Champion. Amazing.
Allegedly,
Incredible.
I did it.
So let's talk about on the open service. How did you select your coffees and maybe the story behind the 2 coffees?
The blending idea came to me a long time ago. That was in like the start of 2020, right after winning the Swiss one. I just had this idea that I had, you know, coffee A and I wanted a little bit more from it and was looking for coffees to blend with it. And like it was just an idea that never really left my mind. In actuality, the Catucaí was the first coffee that I realized I really wanted to use. I visited that farm at La Florida, and this is a coffee that Cole's also bought quite a bit of, the Lucky Boy. It's just delicious. It's something really quite unique. The acidity structure, the flavors are really uniquely high quality herbal, like botanical, a little bit floral, some very light fruits. It's basically all top ends. Like it just has all of the acidities, the high flavors, and not really, like it's sweet enough, but it's not really sweet. It's not like crazy, this is the sweetest cup I've ever had. And so the idea was try and fill it out with something else. And that was when I reached out to Sam Cora in Australia. And we tried a few coffees. We tried a couple of Panama Geishas. We tried some Colombian coffees, again, that Cole helped me find. The Mocha and the Mandela were really interesting. There was like just a lot of options available. And I think in the end, what we brought to Milan was like, we just brought heaps of stuff in the potential that something would work. Like, you know, we just knew something along the lines of light coffee plus heavy coffee equals success. When we were there, or actually even a few weeks before, Sam somehow, and I don't know why, he just decided to try to blend the Catucaí and the Yuji, the Eugenoides, this other species. And he said it was insane. I woke up the next day with the time difference to like a bunch of messages, missed calls from like him, from Sasha. They were all just like stoked on this blend. And I was pretty doubtful at first. I wasn't sure if it was going to actually be good. And he sent me some, and I did the first brew just of the Eugenioides alone, because he said it was a different type of Eugenioides, a new crop, better processing. And I tried some, and it was just awful. Like, I really didn't like it. It was just like this savory sesame snaps, red bean paste sort of taste that I'm just not really a fan of. It is incredibly unique. It has just pure sweetness. It has no acidity. It has no bitterness. It has a huge body. But apart from that, I wasn't super impressed. And I decided to give it another chance, the next day. Maybe it was just aging, whatever. And I tried it again, this time in a cone brewer instead of a flatbed brewer like I did the first day. And I was starting to enjoy the coffee a bit more. It was floral. It was fruity. It was actually quite nice. It had a bit more potential to it. And then we tried with the blend, and then we just started playing around with these blends. We tried all sorts of different things, the Eugenioides and other coffees. We had the Katukai, the Eugenioides. We just sort of started exploring it. And in the end, after a lot of testing, that week before we went to Milan, like the week before the open service started, on the Monday, we came to Milan, and I met Sam for the first time, like properly for the competition. All the rest of the time he was in Australia and I was in Switzerland, so a little bit far away. And we just started to brew and explore. But at that point, we'd already basically locked in this 60-40 ratio of the Eugenioides being the larger proponent and the Katukai being 40%. That didn't really change, but what we did do in that was add different lots and different roasts of each of those coffees. So it wasn't just strictly, here is the Eugenioides, here is the Katukai, but there was different lots within that. I think in the end we used, for the Katukai, it was fermented with the mosto, which is like the liquid full of bacteria from a previous fermentation of a Cedra lot. So it was the Cedra mosto put in with the Katukai after it was depulped, fermented for a lot less time than the other ones. It was about, I think, 8 days instead of about 15 days in carbon dioxide, so like a carbonic maceration sort of thing, and then washed and dried as before. And that one just paired a little bit better. It had a little bit more acidity, a little bit more fruit, just made it slightly different to the regular Katukai, but not by too much. It was just very subtle differences. And then the same with the Eugenioides. We had a couple of lots that were more fermented. We had different roasts from different roasters. Everything was just like a blend to all come together and then produce this one thing at the end.
So a lot of moving targets, a lot of variables that are changing, a lot of things to consider, and probably more complicated once you add two coffees rather than just going in with one.
Yeah, it's definitely more complicated. The whole 7 days before was a proof of that. I don't know if you're breaking up a little bit, Cole, or not.
I'm not breaking up with you, Matt. I still love you.
And the audio.
By the Drip is sponsored by ROSSO Coffee Roasters. You can check out the home coffee plan subscription on the website, rossocofferoasters.com. This week's subscription coffee is from Don Joel Micro Mill in the West Valley in Costa Rica. We've been purchasing coffee from Alan Oviedo since 2015, and he operates around 20 hectares of coffee production, and we love working with him. I'm drinking a cup of it right now, and to me, it tastes like honey, a bit of plum, and some cola. Sweetness is the most defining cup flavor for sure. Enjoy sipping on some Don Joel while listening to my chat with Matt Winton, Brewers Cup Champion.
Do you think now blends are maybe going to make a big comeback, either on a competition basis or on a retail format?
I think so. I mean, one thing that absolutely blew my mind was that Matteo from the UK, Ply from Canada, who you were there supporting, Daiki and myself all had the same idea to do blends. They were all similar in their ideas and their structure. None of us spoke to any of the other people who did the blends before this. It was just like a thing that happened totally, almost spontaneously. For me, I see it as like this idea was planted in each of our minds, and then it sort of took shape in our own expressions, and we sort of added our own little ways of doing it, slightly different brewing techniques, slightly different ways of presenting it, roasting, blending itself. And I think that's just, it's just beautiful. It's stunning. It blows my mind when I think about it. But, like Ply had washed and natural geishas, Is that right?
Yep.
Both from Panama. Daiki had natural Colombian geisha and a washed Bolivian, so going different origins there. Mateo had a geisha and a Sudan Rumey, both from the same farm. So like there's already 3 other perspectives or their interpretations, their expressions of this blending idea. And I think it's just awesome. It's so, so cool. I mean, their coffees all also tasted fantastic. So it's not like there's, I think that even though it's a trend, it's also just something that's happening. I don't even want to call it a trend. It's just like people are realizing that you can make really dope stuff with blending coffees. I've definitely started to do it a little bit more now, and it's definitely an idea that I want to do more in terms of blending for flavor. I know that like in Australia, they've done this for quite some time, and particularly with Honor Coffee, who, I worked with Sam from Honor. They have been doing some really fancy blends and some really tasty stuff. So I think that the rest of the world is slightly catching up from that because it already does exist. And I think that probably it already has started happening with competition as well. I think there's the Dubai Championships that are on right now. I think it's now, maybe tomorrow. And I think that they already have seen some people using blends. I believe that it probably happened in the past a little bit as well in competition, but maybe people spoke about it less. And I know that in barista, there was a lot more blends than in brewers. I don't know. The only blending routine I could see in Brewers Cup was from 2013 from a competitor that came to Australia with coffee A and then visited a local coffee shop and found all of these other coffees that he was just blown away by. So he just bought them all and blended them all together and served them on stage because he just loved these ones even more than his coffee. It's a very different thing, I think, from what we all came to do this year for some reason.
Yeah, I'm curious on the competition perspective with blending. Like I love the concept because I think barista competition, Brewers Cup competition, it's so often the individual standing there is not telling their story. They're telling the story of everybody else, which I think is beautiful in its own regard. But very rarely or less common, we have somebody standing there talking about how they impacted this coffee and how it's their personal expression and, anything in sort of that line of thought. It's more so, I bought this beautiful coffee from this, intentional producer, and now I'm here standing in front of you serving it, and let me tell you everything about what they did, which I think is also beautiful. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to downplay that scenario, but I think something about blending is you're going up with personal experience in mind, and you're going up with the mastery of your craft and the way that you understand coffee, and you're creating an individual experience and an expression that is really only there in that service, in that moment, in that time. And I think if we circle back to the your intentional way of life and sort of the spirituality and some of the mindfulness that you sort of embody and embrace, I think blending is really a way to personalize a coffee service even further and tailor it as a coffee professional. I think it's really nice. I don't think it's going to be a trend. I think it's.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about this a few months ago. I reached out to you and asked you what you thought of the idea. And yeah, I mean, back then you said basically the same thing you said just now. And that's definitely an aspect of it, I think, this idea of putting your own personal touch on there. When I spoke to farmers about the idea of blending, I only heard positive things. Like they said like, oh, that sounds amazing. Congratulations. That's really cool. That's super interesting. I love how you're doing this. At least these farmers that I spoke to trusted me that it was a good thing. Some thought it was a great way to explain new flavors in the light of people thinking that coffees could be spiked. So it was like a good way of saying, hey, this flavor, it's so intense, it's so unique, it's so obvious, but trust me, it's from the blend, the addition of these components to give you this flavor. It's not that we've taken a coffee that's potentially been spiked or something like this. And that was the worry of one of the producers that I spoke to about the idea of blending, because I think that concern, it spread pretty far. which is a shame. But I don't think that's also hasn't stopped anyone from doing what they're doing as well. Like, I'm super happy to hear that people still competed with coffees from farms that people had thought was spiked. So that's kind of good. We don't need to get into that whole thing. That's just a whole side bit. And something I think we've all got opinions on. No, the whole blending thing I think is awesome. No, I think there was a good amount of feedback about the work that I've done onto the coffee. And I heard, not feedback, but other people asked me, competitors and coaches, like, oh, didn't you get, marks down in your presentation because you didn't talk about the processing, the origin, the farmer, blah, blah, blah. And I think that preemptively, I suppose, that you don't need to say all of the bullshit if you are delivering a good routine and you're making them feel comfortable. Like, I think there's no minimum things you need to say. You can say as much or as little as you want, so long as it's delivered well. And then you can, I was just focusing on talking about the blends. I was talking about the flavors. And at the end of the day, the flavors was, that's what's in the cup, the flavor, the tactile, the experience, right? And that whole cup experience was enhanced by me doing that. And that's literally what it says in the Brewers Cup rules, which is kind of cool. But I think the general thinking is that you need to speak, 1 minute or 2 minutes about the farm, another minute about the processing, another minute about roasting. Then we start to brew, then you do your flavor notes, and then that. So I think it was also quite cool to explore that you don't need to do things in that way. Also, I didn't use a menu, which is still the thing I'm most proud of. Because I think myself included, everyone's like, oh yeah, you have to use a menu. Yeah, what about your menu? What are you going to put the flavor notes on the menu? But again, it's just not about that. And if I go back to a barista competition after this, I definitely won't have a menu.
Could you talk to us a little bit about your brew method and what you did and kind of the ratios? I know there's some home brewers that are wanting to know.
Cool. So the brewing was an interesting one. Like I said, when I got to Milan, we sort of tore down the whole thing. And as soon as I got there, I did a brew of the version that I had of the coffee. And we were using like a 4-pour method. I think it was like a bloom and then a few equal pours or something to that effect. It's like, one every 30 seconds and a minute 15 and then a minute 45 and then drain, whatever it was. Can't really remember too much. And the first thing that happened was Sam and me and Tom, we tasted it. And Sam was like, okay, it's pretty good, but we can do better. And then we just tore everything apart. For the brewing, the next change we did without changing anything else, we ground a little bit coarser, but kept the water, the filter, the brewers, everything else the same. We up-dosed. We went to 20 grams to 300 mils instead of a 16 to 240 brew. And we did 5 pours. And each pour was done sort of as the bed was just draining because we had a few problems with some dryness. And Sam, he's a brewing wizard. He's a coffee god. He's just a beast. And he was like, yep, cool. So to prevent any dryness, what we're going to do is we're going to do more pours, but we're going to make sure that the bed never really runs dry. And the result that we got from that very next brew with the same water and the same coffees, etc., was just mind-blowingly different and so good. Tom and I were just like, fucking hell, like, where did this come from? We haven't been tasting this for the last month, but now all of a sudden we come here, we change just the pouring pattern and the coffee's just incredible. So it's really frustrating, but super cool. Basically what it was 20 grams of coffee, 300 mils of water, 50-gram bloom. In the end, we did it at about 35 seconds. We had some at 40 seconds. We had some at 45 seconds, depending on the age of the coffee. We ground it pretty coarse, like around 30 clicks on the Comandante, somewhere around there. It was on the newer version of the Kinu. It's 3.7, if that helps people. And then we waited a while. The coffee was super fresh. It was 5 days old. And we waited about 45 minutes before going on stage after we ground it, or we ground it 45 minutes before going on stage. Around that 50-minute mark, maybe 1 hour mark, it started to really open up and become very expressive. But again, the coffee was roasted only 5 days before, so it was super fresh. Now I wouldn't wait as long because any coffee that I have of that, even if I froze it, it was still older. It was still more degassed and more aged. So 50 grams, 35 seconds in the end. And then just looking at it visually, once like the drops from the bottom of the V60 started to run dry or just start to drop and then slow down. Then I would pour the next one. The next one was 70. And then after that was 60 grams per pour up to 300. So it was 50, 120, 180, 240, and then 300. And that was the 5 pours. We used the metal V60 in the end, and that higher dose, I suppose, like the 20 to 300 as opposed to like 16 to 240, because it just enhanced the mouthfeel. The mouthfeel just was a bit like the whole body, the whole beefiness of the coffee just sort of sat up a little bit with that not higher ratio, but more coffee and more water. We did a really interesting test with our paper filters, and we found that the Kono paper filter was best for this brew and these coffees. We had a couple of different paper filters, and the results from that was dramatic. And the water that we used was something that we made custom designed ourselves. It was a lot of work, like a lot of work. We had to remake the water several times, even on competition day. That's something that Sam is just amazing at. And in the end, we used magnesium sulfates, calcium chloride, potassium bicarb, and sodium bicarb in some, like it ended up being equal amounts of the salts, and then some ratio of the bicarbs. I can't remember exactly. And that gave just an incredible water to brew with for natural processed coffees. Like for heavier, less sweet coffees, it's just, less acidic coffees, it was just mind blowing. It gives like a lactic quality and just like such a smooth mouthfeel. And brewing this blend on water that's not this water, it's just forget about it. It's just average. It's not that good. But with this water and these combinations and the waiting time after grinding, the rinsing of the paper filter had to be done with a certain type of water. We couldn't do it with the brew water. It just ended up being too minerally. The brew water had to be made on the day with minerals that were rested for 3 days before. Certain bags had to be opened and then closed. Some were like ground immediately. Some were rested, all ground on the same setting. Sam was just an absolute wizard at this. He was just in control of all of these variables. And it was just ridiculous. Really, really, really crazy. But in the end, on that finals day, the result was just mind-blowing. It was nothing like anything we tasted before. The quality of the florals, the mouthfeel, it was just next level. As it cooled, it was just like a jasmine syrup. It was just silly. Just such a yummy coffee. So good. I don't know if you got to try any on that last day, Cole. I can't remember if you were around then.
I don't think I tried it on the finals day, but I tried it the day before that, and it was a beast. I think it was a beast the whole way through. And if you're saying it was that much better on the finals day, I trust that it was that much better on the finals day. It was an incredible coffee. Really glad I got to taste it.
I don't know how it was better on the finals day, but it was. And yeah, I'm glad you got to taste it too. Sorry, Dave.
That's okay. I'm doing the dishes anyways.
At least Cole wasn't competing this time.
Would you say that's the best coffee you've ever had?
I think objectively, probably, yeah. It was, I mean, it scored pretty fucking well. All the people that tried it were pretty blown away. So I guess, yeah, they were the 3 best coffees that I've ever brewed, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been other coffees that I've enjoyed just as much, or if not more. But yeah, it was probably the best objectively. But, you know, sometimes I think just like making a really nice batch brew of a Brazilian coffee is great. Sometimes that's the best coffee ever. Like, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to think. But that last coffee, like the last brew of those coffees, because like you said before, that blend that only existed there on stage. We ground the very last of it to go on stage. And we had one, like a spare dose to the side. And later on that day, Sam and I just sat down together, and Tom disappeared somewhere, so he didn't join us, unfortunately. Sorry, Tom. And we just brewed this coffee and had the last of the water, the last of the coffee, and just sat there in like more or less silence and just enjoyed this cup. And that was really, really cool. That's a very nice moment that we had there. It was just yummy, very yummy.
I want to ask a quick question, and then we'll let Dave kind of take over again. But I want to ask the question about sensory science. I know this is something you are very much into and have presented on in barista competition in Amsterdam, and the way that our bodies and mind and we taste and experience with more than just our taste buds, and that's sight, that's touch, that's vision, that's the full gambit. And I'm curious, one, where you kind of started to learn about sensory science and how that came into your coffee practice, but also how much you've integrated it into your competition routines, and maybe tell us a bit about the cups that you used specifically, because I know there was a lot of intention behind the color, the texture, the maybe other elements I'm not aware of. And why is that important in coffee to further explore?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I got into it first from a mutual friend of ours, Fabiana Carvalho. She's a Brazilian neuroscientist, and she studied sensory science and researches it constantly for coffee, specialty coffee in particular. She's just an absolute beast. She knows a lot. She understands a lot. She's very lovely and super generous with her time, and her knowledge is amazing. So that was definitely where a large chunk of the inspiration came from. I think there was a few things that triggered it. Like, I remember one time researching some stuff from Professor Charles Spence at the Oxford University, and he had, what was it? I think it was like a whiskey tasting. And in this whiskey tasting, you went into different rooms, and each room had like a different color, different materials, and different sounds playing from speakers. Like, I tried to recreate that sort of, like I just had different textures and the headphones on with the sound. And I just realized, like, holy crap, this is totally different. Like, this has a huge impact. Why aren't we talking about this more? Why aren't we setting up spaces and cafes to help promote the flavors that we want to, promote? Not necessarily flavors, but like the experience. That was where all the inspiration came from for that 2018 routine. But then to apply that to this one, like the Brewers Cup, at the end of the day, you can't fuck with the cup too much. Like, not the cup physically, but like the presentation, and you can't make them touch things and smell things or anything like that in brewers like you could in barista. So in barista, I had them stroking things that were a certain texture to help promote another texture. I had them have headphones on to give a different experience, using sight, touch, and sound to help enhance the experience. And for brewers, you just can't do that. There's just no scope in the rules to let you play with other things. You just serve a coffee and that's it. So all that I could really talk about was just the cup and the experience. And I found that this blend tasted like crap in a white cup. It just did not work. And it doesn't still to this day. You have it in a normal like cappuccino cup or any sort of just white cup, and it just tastes like trash. It's like unstructured and kind of like sour and just not very good. If you have it in a cup that's a bit too smooth or too pink, there's some ones that Tom gave me to try. I think they were the coffee cups that he used for his routine in France. And he used like a Napoleon geisha. Like, it's a very, very good coffee, but nothing like the blend. And we tried my coffee in those cups, and it tasted like Napoleon. And I was like, oh man, this isn't right. Like, I don't want my thing to be this heavy and boozy. What's going on? So we ditched those cups. We went to, I actually found it in Copenhagen. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was in Copenhagen for a couple of days, and I just found one single cup with this, like that one that I use on stage, this pink, and it's like a little bit open. It's got a few speckles in it. And I just remember seeing it. I'm going like, that's how I want my coffee to taste. I want it to be like that color, that pink, sweet, marshmallowy, it's got a little bit of edges to it, but it's super smooth and it's like got a good weight to it. And that's just what I knew I wanted to taste in the cup, in the coffee that I was going to serve. So I bought that one and then brought it back to Zurich. And then I was like testing the coffee, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's delicious. And then try a white cup. Oh, that doesn't work. Test Tom's cup. Oh, that didn't work. Just nothing else worked except this one cup. So I had to call up the guys at the museum and ask if they could send some down express. And I think in the end, the cups ended up costing almost 40 or 50 francs each. So not the cheapest cups, just to get a couple of those for competition. But it just helped to, and it really brought out a lot. And like, I think Sam was a little bit skeptical when we were in Milan. And I was like, all right, look, try it in the cups. Exactly the same thing. Pour it in two different ones, one white, one of this pink cup that I had. And he was like, yep, white cup sucks. Get that out of here. We'll stay with the pink one. It just helps to enhance the experience, I think. In terms of like the full multi-sensory science and the perception of taste and flavor. I think more what's happening there is you've got something that's got some good weight to it. It's heavy. That helps to give the body. The pink color helps to give this sweetness that's been proven time and time again. And even more so, color can't really amplify flavor universally. So what might be red for me is raspberry. It could be pomegranate for you. So, it depends on your cultural things for actual flavor. But universally, pink and red is sweet. So this is, there's some things we can do and some things there's a bit of a limiter on. But even still, whenever I pick that cup up, I feel strawberry and raspberry. So like even just looking at those cups, it's like, yep, strawberry, raspberry. It's just jumping out at me. I think the shape of it, not too big of an influence. It probably could have been closed over or whatever, and it would have been kind of similar. But the smooth texture, it's not too rough. It doesn't promote any dryness. Funnily enough, even the cupping spoon made a difference, but I couldn't find any more of the cupping spoon that I would have maybe liked to use to offer them. But the smooth texture, it's not too rough. It doesn't promote any dryness. Funnily enough, even the cupping spoon made a difference, but I couldn't find any more of the cupping. It was just a bigger body. It was really like, okay, that's a big difference. And then went back to the metal spoon, and it's like, yeah, it's a lot more acidity. But in the end, that kind of helped because the cup changed a lot when I went from cupping it or slurping it hot to drinking it from the cup cool. But you had to drink from the cup. It was essential. And the moment that you make that change from like slurping and cupping from the spoon to drinking, the whole coffee changes. And it just goes like, well, now we're smooth. And like we were juicy and silky, and now we're heavy and syrupy. And it just like, whoop, does a total 180 on you. And then the flavors change from being like strawberry raspberry to like a heavier guava sort of thing. It's super, super interesting. And it only comes from testing and playing around and trying to understand what the hell's going on.
I think that's a gold mine, what you just said, for competitors. Just thinking of the whole experience, not just does the coffee taste good, but the touch of the cup, how that affects the flavor. A lot for competitors.
Yeah, I mean, you have to taste it how the judges are going to taste it, right? And it's the same with evaluating the aromas. We had to clarify with some judges because we understood the ruling that said that aromas were only evaluated from the final cup. So that means whatever it's poured into last, that's where it will be properly evaluated into. They did make a rule change to say that if you give it in a server and you ask them to evaluate the server, then that's where they will evaluate it from, but it still needed some clarification. So, of course, we also tested it directly from the cup. Oh, what is it from the cup? If they say, aromas are only evaluated from the final vessel, then what do we need to do to make that experience better? Do we need to get them to stir it first and then evaluate it? Or is it just from the vessel and say, don't evaluate from the cup? You can, like, the rules were clear and they clarified for us now, but we just weren't sure for some of that time. So it's a lot to think about, and also tasting it, how they would taste it. Cool. First sip on stage. Yep. What do you get in the first aromas? That's also why I waited like a minute and a half after brewing to cool down the aromas. That's why I was just standing there swirling. Not only was it a great time to explain this sensory experience, but also it was necessary to get the aromas to be tasty. If I didn't do that, it was kind of like sharp, a little bit chemically. But then once you let them cool down for about a minute and a half, then they just opened up into like rose and jasmine and orange blossom. It was really something else.
What's changed since you've won?
A few more Instagram followers, I guess. I don't know. For me, like I think I explained a bit at the start, still hasn't really sunk in that much. So for me, I'm still the same person that I was before I won, but now people seem to be paying attention to what I say a bit more, and I have to post on Instagram a bit more. I think a lot more opportunities. There's some projects and some people that I'd love to work with that now there's open doors to do that. I feel a lot more responsibility as well. Not even in like a, oh no, lots of responsibility sort of way, but it's like, cool, I get to have my say now. And I'm not typically the person, even though I like being loud and the center of attention, of course, I don't really feel like what I say is more important than what anyone else says. I feel that the responsibility of having a title, it just means that I get to be myself more. And hopefully that is something that is a positive thing for other people. I think doing things exactly like this, like the podcasts and the interviews and stuff like that, can maybe spread a bit more of the message of something good in the industry. I don't even really know what that is, but like, yeah, I don't know. everyone can just like take it easy and be nicer to each other. That's my positive message for the day.
Do you have a piece of advice for other coffee professionals and, how to handle their career or competitions? Just something they could take away from the interview?
I don't think I'd have any one bit of advice in terms of purely like career or competition. I think in general, life advice is just to let things go more and trust in yourself a lot more. But that's like not even like it is kind of with your career and is a little bit competition, but having, surrounding yourself with a great team, having awesome people around you, working hard, resting well, all of these things can only be positives. Like there's no negative effects to getting more rest. There's no negative effects to working hard on something that you're passionate about and believe in. There's no negative thing with having beautiful people around you who support you and who you can have lots of fun with and making connections all over the world. I think if people are maybe on the fence about competing, then I would suggest find a good team around you that can help you and support you to do that. I think that's something that's super important. I think reaching out to people in the community is super great for everything. I'm still so grateful to have met you two and know that I can feel very comfortable reaching out to either of you guys for any questions or advice or anything like that. And having that network all around the world, that's something that's only come because of competing and being in this circle. But then that being said, like, Dave, have you competed before on stage?
No, I haven't.
Yeah. And you're still heavily involved in this. And I don't think it shows that you don't need to be the person on stage brewing the coffee to be in this world as well. So, helping support other people or, if you're doing emceeing or judging or anything like this, there's ways to still be involved and still learn and still pushing yourself. That's just as good as being the competitor, at least in my eyes. I don't see the need to have to compete in order to, elevate your status or anything like this. I think just being yourself is a pretty good start.
I think something you just said a minute ago there, Matt, by winning, you are able to be yourself. You feel you are able to be yourself. Like there's so much humility in that sentence and like so much power. I think if that message gets out, because at the end of the day, it's not about winning or losing. It's just about being yourself and being comfortable within yourself, within this community, within whatever community. And it doesn't matter the titles you hold. It's just, how you maybe feel you fit or finding the way that you fit. But I think there's so much power and humility in that sentence alone.
Totally. Man, what a great way to encapsulate that. Perfect. 100%. Some would even say it's not about you, it's not about me, it's not about them.
We've heard that once or twice.
Yeah, it's a good line. You should write that down, actually.
I heard it's trademarked already.
For home brewers, what recommendation would you have for them? Just one tip that they could do to improve their brew at home right away?
Don't brew with tap water, probably. It's a great start. Water has such a huge impact, and I think that's one of the easiest things to fix, either whether it's remineralizing RO water or pure water or something like this, or filtering it. That's a really good place to start. Then apart from that, just tasting a lot. The more you taste, the more you taste. Getting better at brewing is, for me at least, about trying something, tasting it, realizing it did or didn't work, and then trying it again. I think that's a pretty good place to start. And then just being comfortable fucking up. Like being comfortable not making good coffee for a bit is kind of great. Being part of communities that you can try other people's things or versions of. Like every now and then Cole sends me videos or pictures of some crazy brewing that he's up to where he's putting all sorts of things in different brewers, and it's always interesting. Always learn something. And I guess that exists a lot in like forums or Reddit or something like that as well, where people are trying different things and sharing them, which is cool. But yeah, get better water.
Matt, what's next? Are we going to see you again on the competition stage? Are you going to take this power and do motivational speeches around the world and try to inspire the next generation of coffee brewers? Are you going to start a business, a roastery, a cafe? What's next in your progression here now that you're Matt Winton, World Brewers Cup Champion?
I think definitely I will be back on stage. Not this year or next year. Like I need some time to enjoy this time and take this one step at a time. But I don't know, there's still, I'm originally a barista competition competitor. I did Brewers Cup as a year off of barista and then just sort of happened to get into it and enjoy it a little bit. So I think definitely I'll be back on the barista stage. I'd like to think the WBC stage, but we'll see what happens. And I think there's still just things that, like, I still want to compete. It's still fun. I don't know if I would compete again in Brewers Cup because I'm afraid that I wouldn't get any better than what I did. It's so bloody hard. Like, there's so many other great brewers and awesome people out there that I don't feel like I need to try and prove anything. Well, never try and prove anything, but yeah, it just doesn't really need to go that way. But I think in barista, I'd still like to make some tasty espresso for people. I feel like the last 2 times I was on stage, I had some good potential, but I didn't serve the best coffee I could have. So I want to, I've still got a few places to climb in the WBC. I'd like to give that a go. Then in terms of like work and stuff, we are going to be doing some roasting things here in Zurich, which is really cool. So that will be happening early next year, I hope. Everything's still in the preparation phase of that, and more details will become revealed as they are more, concrete. Nothing's really fixed at the moment, but yeah, we're trying to start 2 parts of a roasting sort of thing. One is like the more wholesale commercial in a way where it can be for a lot of people at not too expensive of a price, but still something tasty. And that's something that we don't see very much here in Zurich. A bit more focus on offices and espresso. And then the other one is a brand that would be coffee that me and my business partner just really like to drink ourselves. And that's sort of, in a way, it's a bad metric because it means that we can never leave the company, but that's also fine as well, I guess. It's just like every cupping that we do, we're just like, do you like that? Like, yeah. You want to drink that at home? Yeah. You want to sell it? Yeah. All right, cool. Then, let's buy it. And other stuff could be incredible, but like maybe it's not our personal preference. So we're a bit averse to buying it and then selling it on. So I think there has to be something in there about the passion of actually enjoying the cup for ourselves. But it's interesting. It's cool. And that will all become revealed in the new year, in the next few months, I hope.
So Matt, where can people find you online?
My OnlyFans account is, no, just kidding. So just mostly on Instagram. I don't really use Facebook or anything like that. You can always send me a message if anyone has any questions or anything like that. I think my Instagram is Matt_Winton. Nice and easy. It used to be the Swedish coffee guy, but not anymore.
Okay, Matt, we really appreciate it. You're an amazing coffee professional. You're such a sweet guy, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much for having me and creating this platform. And thank you very much for Cole for waking up at 3 a.m. in Canada time to be here today. I heard that he didn't actually go to sleep. I heard he just partied straight through. But, if that's not Cole, then who is on a Wednesday night going out for...
Exactly.
You got to party on through till that podcast on Thursday morning. So good on you, Cole. Thanks for staying awake.
That's right.
I just assumed that Dave is just more responsible and would be happily up earlier. He doesn't even look tired.
No. This is my time.
Normal day for Dave.
Yoo-hoo! Beautiful.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Thank you so much again, guys. Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Wow, you've made it. Thanks for listening to By the Drip. If you could please subscribe, rate, and give us a comment, that'd mean the absolute world to me. Till next time.